Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode with the New York Knicks. Now, the Knicks are an interesting case. After struggling for a while, they drafted Kristaps Porzingis and many people expected a rebuild in New York. The Knicks, however, decided to skip a few steps and signed players like Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, Brandon Jennings and Courtney Lee. Combined with superstar Carmelo Anthony, at least on paper, the roster in New York was ready to attack. What followed was a rather disappointing season, which made a lot of fans think that rebuilding might have been the better choice. That choice, however, was and is still somewhat hindered by the fact that Carmelo Anthony holds a no-trade clause and seems to be unwilling to waive that. And to be honest, I can't really blame him for that. Right now, the Knicks are stuck somewhere between a rebuilding team and a contender for a playoff spot. They lack direction and they have a lot of money committed to aging stars. There is potential for a few moves to be made in New York, but before we jump into that, let's get to know our personnel a bit more. At the point guard spot, a clear-cut starter is Derrick Rose. Rose is no longer the MVP caliber superstar he once was, but he is still a solid option here. His role with the team might come to an end soon because Rose is on an expiring contract, but more on that later. His rather lackluster backup is 23-year-old Jason Randle, who at this point in his career is sadly not really capable of seeing regular playing time even as the backup. The shooting guard then has a bit more players to choose from, with the starting spot likely going to Courtney Lee. Justin Holiday is a serviceable alternative and both of them can form a nice two-man rotation at the shooting guard. Ron Baker and Sasha Vujicic are third-string options at best, but since both of them are on expiring contracts, I would not get too attached to them. The starting small forward is an easy choice with Carmelo Anthony, who will likely play heavy minutes here. Keep in mind though that Anthony is not getting any younger and that he likely won't be able to consistently carry the team the way he once was. Lance Thomas is the only real option backup-wise here, so you really don't have any other choice than to play him. The power forward is again pretty obvious. 21-year-old Kristaps Porzingis will get the starting job here, and despite Carmelo Anthony's history with the team, Porzingis is the player to build around in New York. With Mindaugas Kuzminskas, the Knicks have a slightly undersized and also somewhat injury-prone backup who is probably best used as a stretch 4. Maurice Ndur is once again a third-string option at the power forward, but should not see playing time at this point. The center spot is then a bit more tricky. Currently, the highest-rated player is Willy Hernan-Gomez, and him and Porzingis could form a very promising frontcourt duo for the future. His backup could be Kyle O'Quinn, but O'Quinn works a lot better as a power forward since he's a bit undersized for the center spot. Making that switch would also free up a space in the rotation for Joakim Noah, and you better give him that spot, otherwise his $73 million contract would be completely wasted. Marshall Plumlee is then the fourth center you have available, and unless you have severe injury problems, he won't be in the rotation. Now up next, the number of expiring contracts in New York is not too large, but with Derrick Rose, one of your star players, expires, and the decision whether or not you want to bring him back will likely have a big impact on the franchise's direction going forward. Next to Rose, the contracts of Vujicic, Holiday, Randle and Baker expire, and apart from Holiday, those are all not rotation players at the moment. Holiday could even be part of your starting unit though, so keep an eye on him in free agency. The Knicks also have 3 team options going into the next offseason. The one on Porzingis is a no-brainer, while the options on Plumlee and Ndur can also be declined depending on your overall strategy. For the current 2016-17 season, the Knicks are slightly above the cap, but with Derrick Rose and a few others expiring, they have close to $24 million available in free agency. Even with Porzingis' team option included, that should still be enough to bring another star to New York, even if it's just the returning Derrick Rose. Let's also have a look at draft picks, and a big relief here, the Knicks own all of their first-round draft picks for the next 4 years. They have also acquired a few second-rounders from Chicago, Houston, Cleveland and LA, and interestingly, all of New York's own second-rounders will go to other teams as part of previous trades, but that will likely neither make or break your franchise. Now, as usual, before we go into the moves, here are your 3 key questions to answer before going into year 1 with the Knicks. Question number 1, attack or rebuild? This is probably the most important question that needs to be answered before taking over the Knicks, as the overall direction of the franchise should guide all of the moves you make. With Porzingis getting better year after year and Carmelo Anthony still under contract for a while, you might decide to improve the roster further and aim for the playoffs. However, it might also make sense to let Rose walk in free agency, collect assets while waiting out Anthony's contract, and redesign the team around Porzingis. Both strategies are perfectly fine in my opinion. The important thing is to decide for one and stick with it. Question number 2. Are both Noah and Lee worth their money? This goes hand in hand with question number 1, and if you decide for a rebuild, then I suppose both Noah and Lee won't be part of that. But even if you decide to improve the roster further and go for the gold in the East, your options for improving the team might be severely limited by the sheer size of Lee's and Noah's contracts. Combined, you owe the two of them over $120 million for the next 4 seasons. Since both men are already in their 30s, they will likely not improve any further, and it is up to you to decide if you want to spend that much money on 2 declining veterans. And question number 3, how do you assign minutes in your frontcourt rotation? If you leave your rotation as is and play the 2 best players on each the power forward and center position, then Joakim Noah won't see minutes. That might be something you want to avoid, both because of his contract and also because he's still somewhat serviceable. Additionally, there are 2 players in your current frontcourt rotation who might be suited for a role change. Kuzminskas makes for a good small forward to back up Anthony, at the same time making Lance Thomas obsolete in that role, and Kyle O'Quinn is best used as a power forward where he could fill a potential hole left by Kuzminskas and back up Porzingis. Now for the untradables, and when it comes to players that can be considered untradeable in New York, only Porzingis and Anthony make the list. Porzingis because he is the most valuable asset the Knicks currently have, and Anthony because even if you wanted to, you just can't trade him thanks to his no-trade clause. Don't get me wrong, Derrick Rose is a great player as well, but on an expiring deal and with a big question mark regarding the team's future, he is definitely not untouchable. And with the situation overview out of the way, let's jump right into it. Here are 3 moves to make in year 1 in MyGM or MyLeague mode with the New York Knicks. Move number 1, trade Joakim Noah. Keeping Noah and his ridiculous contract around is in my opinion a huge risk. Noah is extremely injury prone around his feet, at 31 years old he's not getting any better, and with Hernangomez safely locked in as the starting center, he would get paid $73 million to come off the bench. With a potential switch to power forward for Kyle O'Quinn in mind, trading Noah would create a hole at center, so keep that in mind. Another thing that should be mentioned is the fact that a rather large number of quality backup big men will enter free agency, so you do not desperately need to acquire another long-term option here. With that in mind, this trade right here quickly rises to the top of the list for potential moves. Noah and a second rounder for Tiago Splitter from the Sixers. We would get Noah's huge contract off the books and acquire Splitter for 1 year. In that 1 year, Splitter can back up Hernangomez, and then in free agency we can re-evaluate the need for a backup center. Another option that works very similarly is this trade for Roy Hibbert from Denver, by the way. Players like Robin Lopez and Jan Mahinmi are technically also available, but they are also somewhat overpaid and you would not really solve the problem. I went with Splitter here simply because he's slightly higher rated than Hibbert, who is still a very solid alternative. Move number 2, restructure your frontcourt rotation. In the aftermath of this first move, it is now time to free up a spot in the rotation for our newly acquired backup center. That means we will switch Kyle O'Quinn from center to power forward, which will raise his rating from a 76 to a 77. This will now allow him to play solid minutes as the backup power forward, maybe even with some minutes at the center here and there. At the power forward, our previous backup Kuzminskas has now been replaced, which means we can safely switch him from power forward to small forward for an awesome 3-point rating boost. This in turn, however, makes Lance Thomas more or less obsolete, and that brings us straight to move number 3. And you guessed it right, move number 3 will be to trade Lance Thomas. The reason for this trade should be rather obvious now, but on top of his lacking role in the rotation, Thomas is also one of the better paid players on the Knicks. He actually has the 5th highest contract while being only the 10th best player on the team. So it is safe to say that he is slightly overpaid, and since we don't have much use for him after the 2 moves we just made, let's ship him off. A good target here would be a backup point guard, since that is probably our biggest need right now. On the list for this move is therefore this trade, Lance Thomas and a second rounder for Langston Galloway from the Kings. Galloway could bring us some much needed depth at the point guard position while still reducing our total payroll thanks to his slightly less expensive contract. He does have a player option coming up, so if you don't want the uncertainty that comes with that, another move might make more sense for you. And one potentially interesting move could be this one for Matthew Dellavedova from the Bucks. You would acquire a pretty hefty contract but fill the need at point guard long term. To compare the contracts of Thomas and Dellavedova, over the next 3 years, Dellavedova earns roughly $9 million more than Thomas, so the increase is significant but not crazy high. Still, I can see why this trade might appear unattractive to some of you, so here's a third option. Lance Thomas and a second rounder for Tyler Ennis. Ennis gets paid substantially less than Thomas and is capable enough as a point guard to fill a need. He also has a team option coming up, so we have full control over his future with the team, and that might be interesting if, for example, you're able to draft another point guard. On top of that, Ennis also has the age factor on his side, and as you can guess, with that much upside, I was quick to pull the trigger on this one. Alternatively, there are a few solid point guards available as free agents, so if you don't desperately want to get Thomas off the books, signing someone from the list of free agents is also always a possibility. Now, where does this leave us? As you might have noticed, I specifically did not mention Derrick Rose in my 3 moves because the decision what you do with him depends largely on the direction you choose for the team. If you want to rebuild, then I would let him walk in free agency and target the point guard in one of the next drafts. If you want to improve the team further, then you can bring him back or look at alternatives in free agency. The list of comparable players is rather short though, unless you aim for the Steph Curry or Chris Paul level. If you followed these moves, then you should now be able to enter free agency with close to $45 million, by the way, already including the team option for Porzingis. That is more than enough money to lure a star or two to New York, but of course nothing forces you to spend all of that right away. Whichever way you decide, let me know how you would handle the Knicks in MyGM or MyLeague mode, leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and of course, if you want to support the channel, then feel free to subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!